Then you see a headline like this, and it really rattles me. And I will tell you, Mrs. Brady gives me free reign to talk about just about everything in my life. She hates when I start talking about what we paid for our first home in Michigan, the very little money we were making at the time, and how long we had to save. But it is true. The headline here in Toronto, no less, how the dream of the single family starter home vanished. And it's a stark headline. There's a lot of examples. John Pasalis, who we have on a regular basis, documents how long he had to save for his first home around 2000. So these are his details. A detached house in East York cost about $300,000 in 2000. I mean, you're laughing at this, listening to me describe this 23 years later. And condos you could get in at $225,000, $230,000, 10% of that, $22,000. Of course, that's a reasonable stress test to put into a home, but it just feels like that starter home for people is just it's too much. It's too much to even handle right now. Let's get the word from Develle Morrison, who we love talking to about real estate. She's a broker at Bosley Limited, and we've had her on several times. It's great to have you back on. Thanks for getting up early for our audience.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Greg. I really appreciate it.
100%. It's one of those scenarios. Who is coming to you right now, and what are the stories you're hearing from people that want to enter the real estate market via a condo or the so-called starter home for the first time? They probably just have a lot more stress than they did a couple years ago at this time, with interest rates where they're at and trying to figure out what to do.
Well, right now I've got some first-time home buyers who are looking to get into the market. They see that prices are a little bit lower, and they see that they don't have to go through the multiple offer process. They've got a little bit more time to think and plan. So some of those people are coming to the market. But I also have people who are just doing their regular, we've got somebody who he's upsizing. Mm-hmm. He's buying a new place. He's going to be selling his old place that's a little bit smaller. But there's really all kinds of basically the same kinds of people that were in the market before are still in the market now. I have another couple where, we sold their condo at the height of the market. They're now renting, and now they're looking to get back into the market and buy a house.
We're seeing a lot of building in Toronto. I mean, maybe that's never going to change. We'll always see cranes in the sky and construction sites that'll be more for real estate than it will be for commercial, especially with more people, potentially working from home for a couple weeks at a time. Do you see any sign of building slowing down? Does that end up creating more demand, but more supply at the same time?
Well, I think we've got a couple of challenges right now. The interest rates are so high, it's making it really difficult for those builders to build. But also the development charges that the city has created. You mentioned at the top of the break about John Tory, but they've created a huge increase in development charges, and they don't seem to understand that there's an implication for that. So I would say that you're going to see a lot of builders land banking right now. They're not going to build as much as they were building before. Also, pre-construction condo sales are down drastically because, a lot of the people who purchased those pre-construction condos were investors. And the rates are so high right now, people aren't sure if they're actually going to be able to close after that condo that they build has been built. And so now you're seeing the pre-construction condo market, that's really taken a huge dive in the number of sales. You've got people, delaying projects. So I would say that, before we did have this sort of, building, I think that things are going to slow down a little bit until interest rates taper off just a little bit to make things a little bit more affordable for the builders.
We tend not to use the phrase the Canadian dream, but that starter home is the American dream. To get going, little white picket fence, 3-bedroom ranch. I mean, that's how you get started in the real estate game. When you read an article like the one I referenced, do you see that it's more difficult to attain for the average person based on either the stress test, based on the down payment, based on just wanting to live maybe where people grew up?
Yeah, absolutely. All of those things make it really hard for someone to get into the market. But I would challenge your thought of the Canadian/American dream of the house with the white picket fence, because for me, I think it's about getting your first step on the property ladder. And to me, getting your first step on the property ladder is getting that 1-bedroom condo. That's what I did 20 years ago. Yeah. That's what a lot of people did to get into the market. That first step is that, 1-bedroom condo. And then when you're ready to move up, it's a 2-bedroom condo. And then you can move into a semi-detached house and then maybe a detached house. I think the challenge is when we think that everybody needs to get a detached house right away, That's where we're missing the dream, because the dream takes time. It doesn't happen overnight.
It's really interesting you say that, because we knew, my wife and I bought in 2002 in Michigan. We knew we were limited with income. We knew there's no question we settled. I wonder if you're saying that people coming and looking to get into the process and get into the market maybe aren't as realistic as you and my wife and I were a decade and a half ago or so.
Absolutely. I think having some sort of realistic view is critical. But I also think that when we're talking about housing, we sort of miss the demographic piece as well. And so I can't remember what the last StatsCan study was, but they basically said that there are now more single households than there are coupled households. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the fact that people are staying single longer, if you've got a single income, you're definitely going into that one-bedroom condo. You simply couldn't get into a house just right now on one income. So I think that's another reason why you've seen the condo market take off, because there are more single households, and there's more people who don't have kids anymore either, right? Mm-hmm. We do have the demographic shift where people are not having as many kids. Therefore, they don't need that big house that we've been talking about. A condo is fine, thank you very much. But the other demographic shift that we have right now are those boomers that are 70 plus, that have those big houses now they don't need the big house. Now they prefer that condo. So I think that there's a lot going on in the real estate market, aside from interest rates and lower prices right now. But demographics is definitely a huge thing to think about too.
Develle Morrison's our guest, real estate broker at Bosley Limited. She's joining us on Toronto Today. You make a great point. I lived with a partner when I was 23 and she was 21, and we didn't last. Like, it wasn't meant to work out. But a different. Why are you laughing? I know you're thinking, how's that? You must have been so mature at 23. You're thinking about me, aren't you? But nonetheless, like, it's so much easier to disassociate because we were renting at the time. You give 2 months notice. I think I even kept the place, and a roommate of mine, a buddy of mine, moved in. But it's a little bit easier to decide who takes the cat and decide who splits up the CDs and the shelves than it is to split something that you bought. So I think you make a great point about, people that are going all in. You're probably better in to get your foot in, be single, and then make those big life decisions after you at least have some equity in the market.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And the other thing too is the bank of mom and dad. Right. So we also do have that generational wealth shift right now too, where you do have the boomers passing money down to their kids to help them get started in the market. And, most people I know, regardless of age, and so this is not just a millennial thing. I think people always want to say it's just the millennials, but I would say that most people had a little bit of help from their parents. So unfortunately, the people who don't have parents who can help them out, they are the ones that are at a serious disadvantage.
Well, I always make the point that in Toronto, especially I'd say Toronto, Vancouver, and we're really getting outwards in the GTA as well, Develle, is people would say, yeah, I'd like some help from my parents, but the process was get some help, borrow some money, maybe they'd give it to you, maybe you'd pay it back. The idea was, hey, mom and dad, I need you to sell your house so I can buy my first house. That wasn't on the cards for our generation, and I'm not sure that's great in the long term either. Nobody wants to make that ask, and nobody wants to have that question on their, facing them to say, I need to sell my own home so my kid can be a homeowner someday. We never had to do that.
But I don't think those people are selling their own home to give their kids money, right? I think they're just pulling equity out of their house. Again, I forgot the exact stat, but I believe it's somewhere around 30% of Canadians don't have a mortgage. So let's think about that. 30% of Canadians don't even have a mortgage. So that tells me people have a ton of equity in their homes that they can pass on to their kids without having to sell to help their kids.
Is the stress test in a good place right now? I know there's sort of always rumor speculation that they'll reduce it. They probably won't eliminate it, but is it at the right spot right now to make sure that buyers can make their payments?
I think it's terrible.
Yeah.
I think they should get rid of it. I think that they created it a few years ago to make sure that when times got tough, aka what we're going through right now, people could still afford their mortgage payments. So I feel like now that the times are here, we've got those higher rates. Take the stress test out, because now you really are impacting the ability for some people to even get into the market. And there was that story a few weeks ago about a number of people who'd purchased pre-construction houses for $2 million. I believe it was in Brampton. And, now because of the stress test, some of them couldn't qualify for mortgages anymore. Their houses were appraised at 1.6 million instead of the 2 million that they paid for them. Their, mortgage payments were double of what they were expecting. So I kind of think, that stress test, I'm not sure that it's doing what we need it to do now. It did a few years ago, but now I think it should be taken away. But I mean, what do I know?
Well, but that's fascinating because people are coming to you and you're having honest, real conversations about what a down payment should be. What is sort of that window? Let's just say it's $1 million property. What's that sort of window of a down payment? Is it north of 20%? It has to be at least 15, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be. It's $200,000. It's 20%. For that $1 million house. For less than $1 million, then yes, they can have a lower down payment. But in terms of down payment, because some people say, oh, but I want to save and I want to have more and more and more for my down payment. I would say to people, get the minimum down payment that you need and get into the market. Because the reality is okay, not this year, but in previous years, the market was increasing faster than you could save. And so you were missing out on the increase of the market simply because you were trying to save. Now, of course, we go into 2023, the market's down. And, can I tell you the exact percentage that I think that the market's going to be going down this year? No, of course I can't. Mm-hmm. But I do think the market isn't going to be doing well this year. I don't think that the prices are going to be going up right now. I do think prices are going to be going down. So it is a good time for buyers to get into that market. And also, I would say it's a good time for buyers to reach out to those mortgage brokers and make sure they have all their I's dotted and their T's crossed, and make sure that they can get the best rate and they have the best strategy. Because especially now, when it comes to rates the way they are, they need a good mortgage broker to navigate this pathway. So whether that's they need to have a 1 year or a 2 year fixed and then switch to variable or stick with variable. But right now, more than ever, I really do think that those buyers need the advice of those mortgage brokers, specifically because of what's happening right now.
She knows her stuff. She keeps it smart and simple. We love having her on. Develle Morrison, real estate broker at Bosley Limited. Thanks so much for the chat, and we'll have more as the winter goes on. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Develle Morrison joining us on Toronto Today.